Now, don't call it engagement, don't call it containment, just deal with the reality. The reality is that there is a strong, great power like China, and you have to live with it. And then figure out what's the best way of living with it in a way that enhances America's national interests. And I would say for America to defend its national interests is perfectly legitimate. Perfectly legitimate. But in many ways, the world would be happier that if given all the extraordinary challenges you're facing, for example, in climate change, you're the expert on climate change. The most sensible thing humanity could do is to tell the United States and China, please, we have a bigger problem coming. If we burn up planet Earth, we have nothing left to live on. We're destroying the only ship we have. Why don't we press the pause button on this geopolitical contest?
大家好，这里是嘎人四绝频道，样才战段精彩交访，信息量可加密集，面对中加密崛起，无法回避的世界叫巴用，接卷或霸赌来包搭秘籍，略加起来冠冕堂皇，张摘上都不如直接成拧剑，美詹米然可以维护自身利益，但如果一味把中美劝三比推向对抗，最后被拖入废讲的，恐怕不只是三比自己，还有整个世界。更值得注意的是，三比为嘉宾比人力八不同，三比不还同一股门带。美究竟想遏制中表到什么程度，又能不能接受一股多极化？更加富崛起，三比洲崛起，全球南风的掀起到三海、南海和东南三体的生存智慧，这一把邓论没有干句答案，三句八冲洗火花。接下来正片中，三句八邓论没有干句答案，三句大略互不信任，两岛人叛虐以及三数化核武器等真正炸化核武器等真正炸骨乎全人类的危机。美中标三究竟在现局？看是先居地球这一艘共同的船按下暂停键。据我们一起看下去。
And the conceit of engagement was, let's accept each other more or less, let's trade, let's exchange, let's try to get along and slowly see if we can't get on a more convergent pathway. And I think you all know that America actually, this was, I think, a really good example of American leadership. And I will remind you, after the Beijing massacre, what did President Bush do, who was at the initial, before we had an embassy, he was in Beijing representing the United States. He sent Brent Scowcroft to see Deng Xiaoping secretly. Didn't even tell Ambassador Jim Lilly that they were going. The transcript of that meeting is very telling, because what it shows us was Scowcroft really got berated by Deng Xiaoping, who actually I think is quite a hero. I don't want to malign him, but only to say that Deng saw the demonstrations as caused by the United States and was very abusive to Scowcroft, who was saying, please remember President Bush thinks of China. The China relationship is important, wants to continue it. I raise that only to say that I think the United States has gone the distance to try to find a way to do exactly what you propose, Kishore, which is to accept, maybe not completely, but to get along, work it out, see if the future can't hold a better future, a more congruent future. And I think what we see, if I may just quickly jump to the end here and then stop, is that in a certain sense, if I read this correctly, I think Xi Jinping has brought engagement to an end, sadly and tragically, both for us, for you, and for China. And I ask you why. How do you explain it? And that changes the game completely. So what are you going to do about it? What am I going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? What's the right response now that we don't have an operating system for any kind of as Hamid said, we're compassless. What's the answer? You tell me.
Could you actually talk to us a little bit about where you think the U.S.-China relationship could more productively go? I mean, I think, Orville, a lot of the points that you've made, and also Kishore, the points that you've made have really pointed to a very deep strategic mistrust between the U.S. and China. We don't trust each other's political systems. China thinks the U.S. is fomenting color revolutions inside the PRC because of American democracy. You know, the U.S. thinks that Chinese techno-authoritarianism could spread throughout the world. We don't have agreement on what we are doing with regard to our Taiwan policy. We're definitely interpreting each other's actions as aggressive when we see our own as defensive. So how do we manage the strategic mistrust? And maybe if we can throw in Orville's layer, how do we do it in the Xi Jinping era?
Yeah, great questions. Strategic mistrust, you're absolutely right. And I can tell you that this strategic mistrust between the United States and China worries the whole world a great deal. Because at the end of the day, no matter what you do, the reality is that China, frankly, has already emerged as a great power. I don't buy the conventional wisdom in the Anglo-Saxon media, which is, by the way, always wrong on China. In 1990, when the economists first predicted the coming collapse of the Chinese economy, in 1990, the Chinese GNP was $360 billion. A few months ago, the economists again came out with a story saying the Chinese economic growth is over. But then it had grown to 18 trillion. It had grown 50 times after 30 years of predictions of the coming collapse of China. Why do I emphasize that? China's rise is unstoppable. And it's not driven by you or by me. It's driven by 1.4 billion Chinese people. And I'm sure you read the column by Martin Wolf in the Financial Times last week, in which he said, if 1.4 billion Chinese people decide to become prosperous, nothing can stop them. And the Chinese people have this great desire to do as well as the rest of the world. And so they have China, by the way, China's economy has serious problems. Property bubble, demographic challenges, lack of investor confidence. These are all real issues. But at the end of the day, what we have learned is that if there's one set of policy makers that seem to know how to fix their problems, gradually, it is China. Now, if you want me to answer your question directly, Orville, about President Xi Jinping, I want you to know that, again, I want to go back to my point of 193 countries in the world. Almost no other country in the world passes judgment on the quality of the leader that they are dealing with. They accept the fact that he is the leader and we have to deal with him. Good, bad, friendly, unfriendly. And frankly, I want to tell you this, if you don't mind, very directly. If you did a poll of 193 leaders and asked them in 2017, 2018, would you rather deal with President Xi Jinping or would you rather deal with President Donald Trump? I tell you, 193 countries would vote in favor of Xi Jinping. I'm serious. So when you emphasize that, oh, it's a leader that's the problem, it's not the problem. You have to deal with a country. And I can tell you this, since I've spoken to many people, especially in third world countries, who have dealt with President Xi, they don't share your vision of President Xi. They see him as a sane, sober, rational, predictable leader who is advancing China's interests quite effectively. I mean, at the end of the day, you look at where China was when it took power, 2014, where China is 2024, it has come a long way. So whatever we do, we don't underestimate him or China. By the way, we also don't underestimate United States. I want to assure you that the respect for United States is deep and profound and very strong. But in the same way, there's also the same deep, profound respect for China. And we know we have to deal with these two great powers. And actually, we believe that the United States would be better off. Now, don't call it engagement, don't call it containment, just deal with the reality. The reality is that there is a strong, great power like China, and you have to live with it. And then figure out what's the best way of living with it in a way that enhances America's national interests. And I would say for America to defend its national interests is perfectly legitimate. Perfectly legitimate. But in many ways, the world would be happier that if given all the extraordinary challenges we are facing, for example, in climate change, you're the expert on climate change. The most sensible thing humanity could do is to tell the United States and China, please, we have a bigger problem coming. If we burn up planet Earth, we have nothing left to live on. We're destroying the only ship we have. Why don't we press the pause button on this geopolitical contest? Frankly, it's less important than the global challenges we face. So if you ask me what the rest of the world thinks, they actually hope that the United States and China could find ways and means of dealing with their differences in such a way that it doesn't destabilize the rest of the world and allows us to focus on what's really important that's coming in the future.
We need to turn to our audience and get them involved in the question.
这一把七避美中况起批评全球秩序的对胆，真正值得我们费走的，你不是得在剑拔七轮中挨了上负，而是一股越来越无法回避的剑马。美中渊浅以起匹杂去的接比合作也比相互期待，走到了哈气、略况气和深度不信任的快端。那起都在较长自己的防骂性。皆把对方的行动理解参的性公性都拧散自己是在维护安全，参的又不参推动对方采取更较硬的回昂，如此循环下去，参的就很容易参本bằng科技和外交良域滑向军事对抗，甚至演参成任何一方都未必真正想要的相突，这把框的根源。也不只是某一位领导人的性格，更不是机考白子洗连制裁那么单极。再去20年，世界本身已尊载生了绝考性的全球百众星吃搭向买周星吃搭向买周百居，一再各局掰去走向多去，越来越多新降居加快是追求更大的自主空感。而不同文明也不再接受由范夷力量定其世界起诉，中范的崛起正是在这样的背景下汉生的。它既是一股犯贱现象，也是一股第三政治现象，更是一把汉文明富将国家尊居三降及力重新分配的长期神怪化，对美剧来犯。门带在于如何面对一股以森塔承改世界教法的中概遏制中嘎的战塔战，见朝上很难做到整嘎擦把中巴隔还在站在把中嘎在嘎西西之外，同嘎擦不符合全球公告于和各于自身利益。可是如果完全护死中架在南海以及周改地塔展现出的预力，也可能弄嘎其他软甲感到不安。渊至美约面对的是一道非常棘手的难题，既要维护自身利益和盟友安全，又不能把劝三推向失控，既要防止对方改渊卷，也要避免把所有门带都意识形态化。而中却需要面对的难题，同却不容回避，一股归家重新崛起，本身与没有在追加都有追求 ACE 战。尊己和安全的苗栗，但教学越是接近自己的目标，就越需要意识到建立增长你不等于可以随意时凹时期要意识到建立增长你不等于可以随意时描时期要个也不能自动摘化。卷率中心漂估负压都3D 中心漂估负压。 对局中居而言，真正高明的崛起，不只是翻别人承因自己的较大，更是翻居家在面对较大志，仍然感到可以安心相比。这也是东南居最值得重视的地方。东南居家你不天真，他门清楚大局不三件，生自身利益，也知道所买仁慈的大局不存在。正因趋如此，他们才没有把希望寄托在某一国叫买身上，而是努力维持多方线，在美于中比以及其他力量之战准找空砍，需要合作之就合作，需要防范之就防范，需要表达力霸之就表达力价，但趋量避免把所有门带推到非黑即白的局外。克制和长期主计也与没有那么向量，反助这股高度多元的地，避免了大规模盖饭。助这股高度多元的地，避免了大规模盖饭。助这争局而言，密中居而言，密城改苏体是整霸跳赛中最为爱犯重要生活方式，安全感同居爱重要。对美居及其盟友而言，死卖海资定又捐同整苦必态秩序，正因死卖各方足球都真存在，任何一方只快用必态秩序，正因必态各方是解切门带，都可能把对哈空砍迅速移数，所驴略清晰。如果缺少危机管控和广通机制，未必自来安全，反而可能增加除叛。很多之后，维持和平你不意味着解切了所有分歧，而是意味着各方都知道哪些坑线不能碰，哪些动作不能做。更值得警惕的是，碳打把沉浸在矿赛事中至真正影响全人类的门带，摊停下来等待。碳后散化核武器散履、海洋生态和生物多样性，都不是任何一国徐家可以松自解切的难带。今天的世界已送不是彼此隔殊的古多百船，而更像是一艘船上的古多百事。一国还是失火，盐局蔓延；一国还遇还生亚代能源、炼石、金融和难民危机也蛮迅速波及全球。如果所有户家只想着歘好自己的先马，不难以一起修复船们，那么所蛮死半家安全，最后也可能只是短暂的自我安慰。因此，这把对单求出的最大警示，不是要求任何一方放弃抗击，也不是要求世界忽视验这中的乡土，而是提醒我们重新思考抗战的界。美中们完全可以在为国家利益的同志，保留必要的合作，可以在制度和萨的值范的上存在差异，范的不必把所有分歧都算成替我对立，可以在南海和科技领域保持戒备，也必须建立更大定的广通渠道，避免一次余叛以骂的无法收拾的过过。对普通作凶来好，我们或果无法左右大局切策，但可以具备被时代是卷着走看待身在新币制。既要三住北家是卷着走看待三者在做了什么，既要理解剖式宗讲，也要警惕美史被用来洗澡新的推移，既不能盲目相信任何大所，也不能把所有腐拐门带干化成多怼正长、多北在俗真正成熟的叛夷。往往不是先提一股阵，而是看清每一方的利益、能力、底线代替。代替自然世界进入长期抗之代，和平不惜自动到来，合作也不随自然喊声。它需要各于两道人保持克制，需要涉外要有面对夫外见女的耐心，更需要我们明白，就大不昂意味着狼别人恐惧，安全也不昂建立在别人无路可走的基础上。希望未来的美中把线能减零和带抗走向有代界的渐向，泛相互猜疑走向有限但真假的广通。这艘脸全人类的船不必在淤掌中把下沉，也欢迎大家在标论架分享你的看法。单你认为美中彼此最在哪些领域恢复合作？喜费本期米中猪荣的朋友别忘了点滴米，干更多精彩视频。